Talk real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, future-proof knowledge.
We are live on YouTube. Welcome back to episode 3. I'm going to run out of fingers very quickly. Episode 3 of the Future-Proof Knowledge podcast. Today, I am joined by Mr. J. Sean Mills. J. Sean, how are you doing today?
I am doing absolutely excellent today. How are you doing, Alan?
I'm doing pretty good. And we are joined by the star of the show that everybody seems to be loving, Olive Hikmat. Olive, how are you doing? Maybe Olive's got some issues with her sound, but hopefully she'll be able to get herself sorted. But yeah, Olive is the star of the show. All of our little clips that we've been putting out every week, Olive's ones are the ones that get the most views, Jay Sean. Are you surprised?
Not surprised at all when you have that many years of education under your belt and knowledge in this space. It makes it pretty easy to be the star of the show.
Yeah, and she does it without even trying. Like, that's what I love about Olive. She just talks and we all just listen. But today, folks, we are going to be talking a little bit about careers. So for most of us who've gone through the education system, what we will have experienced is you go into school and you will be advised on, go get yourself sorted, study, and then when you study, you'll get a qualification, you'll go to university, and then you'll get a career. And then once you get that career, you can go along and you will be able to earn money until you retire. And then in retirement, you wait until death. And that is the way it's gone for years and years and years. And I suppose what we're here to talk about today is that basically that isn't actually the reality of the situation for people who are living in the here and now, who are actually growing up in the world, or even people as old as me and you, Jay Sean, and as young as Lisa, and as young as Olive, and as young as Tana, who's just jumped in as well. Like, for those young ladies and us old guys, like, we can still change our career at the stage that we're at. And I want to kind of delve into why we still get that pressure from the system to tell us that, we need to get this career. So, like, Olive, I'll come to you. Like, I'm sure when you were going through your studies and stuff, it was very much the norm that you would get a job straight out of school, and then or straight out of university, and then you would stay in that job for life. Was that the idea you grew up with, Olive? Poor Olive seems to be having issues with her audio. Jay Sean, I'll come to you. So, was that the norm for you growing up?
Yeah, that was it. It was pretty much. I could think back to, I think it was the 4th grade, being asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Because that's what you need to start working on right now. So back then, I wanted to be a police officer. So I wrote this nice little thing in the 4th grade about how I wanted to be a police officer to protect people and to serve and all that good stuff. And that was what my career path was supposed to be. But as fast as my mind moves from different ideas and different goals and plans, that career choice has changed 100 times. More than that, I'm sure thousands of times over the past almost 47 years, 40 something years since I created that little thing saying I wanted to be a police officer. And it's interesting because there's not anyone that I know today that I grew up with that is doing what they set out to do when they were in grades as low as junior high or even high school. Most of the individuals I know these days are doing something totally outside of what they studied in school or even in college.
Yeah, the what I'll say is, in my experience, the only people I know generally who went into a career straight from school in Ireland are generally nurses, teachers, and what we call Garda or police officers. They're the only people who like really kind of stay in their field, and the rest kind of just go off and meander and do different things. Although definitely over the last few years, there's been more and more teachers and guards that I know who are kind of changing. Nurses, in my experience, kind of stick to it because they just have that heart. But maybe that's changing too for other people. Um, Lisa, talk to me a bit about your experience growing up and the trajectory of, you got to go and get yourself a career and stay in that. And has yours changed much over the years?
Yeah. So interestingly, this is such a great question. Um, when I was in school, I very much wanted to get into art. I was all about art. That was what I wanted to do with myself. Um, when I graduated from high school, I went to an art school, and that's where I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. My parents had different ideas for me, I think. So my mom and dad both were teachers. They both had college degrees. They had master's degrees on top of that. So there was a huge expectation, I think, in my home growing up to accomplish that. Like, you're not successful unless you go to school and then go to graduate school. And that was not something I was interested in. Um, so there was pressure to kind of go down that path. My dad did switch careers midway. So he was a math teacher and he went into technology when I was probably around 10. And then he stayed there for the rest of his career. Um, and at some point when I was halfway through college, I shifted gears and went from art to technology. And I will say I've thoroughly enjoyed both. And I've always, as I've progressed through, progressed through my own career, which has been very much based in technology, I still will dip back into art. Um, I've done some coaching, I've done some other things. So I've kind of put my toes out into other stuff, but technology seems to be the comfort zone I come back to. My husband is probably, he kind of breaks the mold that we're talking about. So he went to college, got a job out of college, and he still works for the same company, doing pretty much the same things 30 plus years later. So he's kind of got that old school stability in, this is what I went to school for, this is what I did. So yeah, and I love the startup companies and kind of changing things up. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's probably just using different parts of the brain and stuff like that. So different people get that, uh, I suppose, the endorphins from doing different things or doing the exact same thing because it provides that sense of stability and security and regularity.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. Tana, what about you? Like when you think about what it was like growing up for you, like did you always know that I'm picking a career and I'm staying in that, or were you always thinking, well, I can do lots of different things?
I don't really, I knew I wanted to do something in art. I wanted to go to the school in Minneapolis, the art school in Minneapolis, but my goal was always to work for Disney. I wanted to work, that was like my ultimate goal.
Wow.
Um, I took a lot of turns that didn't happen because I got pregnant. And so that did not happen. But that's okay. So I was always really creative, always doing hair and everything. And actually, my first husband's family really thought I was creative in that sense, and they wanted to put me in beauty school in California. And I probably should have done that because who knows what would have been happening there. But anyways, but no, I never, it was, I don't know. I think I think if I wanted to just do one career, it was always like you should do one career and work. Um, then you stay with that and you have to stick with that. I think that was really beaten to you in school. You work hard, just do and go to school, and that was it. There was never like branch off and do something else. So I think like Jay Sean, I remember taking assessment class or assessment tests and like, what are you going to do? And it was so like, okay, once you figure out that, then that's what you have to do, and there's nothing else. And it's kind of like, well, what if that's not what I want? What if that's not what I, really am passionate about? What if I want to do something else? So I think you kind of get stuck with it and you're like, well, what if that's, if I want to do something else later on? So I think FPK is was, which is why, again, I'm always drawn to it. Like there's so many other alternatives and options because you change your mind,
Yeah,
we do.
we do. And I think like one of the scary things I think for a lot of young people particularly is, we got to get it on the ladder as quickly as possible, because we see everybody else and they're running way past us and they're building careers and getting money and getting cars and getting houses and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll have, like, unintentionally, like not in a bad way, but maybe parents in the background going, look, you kind of got to get yourself sorted. You got to get something going, because you can't live in my house forever. And, you've got these young adults who are going, I don't want to be living in your house right now, but never mind forever. So there's all these pressures to try and get a career. And some people will fall into a career. So I will hold my hand up and say, I absolutely fell into youth work, completely fell into youth work. Well, when I was 16, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I did a week long, um, what was it? What do we call it? Work experience in a law firm. And they put me upstairs in the attic with a load of old files from like the 70s. And I said, read that and that'll give you a good picture. Mind numbingly boring. And I'm trying to be nice to it there. It like totally put me off. I was like, I am not doing that. And then I wanted to do psychology, but like I said, I think on episode 1 or episode 2, my results reflected my effort when it came to my leaving cert. And my results did not get me into psychology. So I went and did applied social science, and I had to go to the UK, which I wouldn't change it. Like, I wouldn't change it for anything. So I went to the UK and I finished university, and I was coming back to Ireland and I needed a job. And my granddad's sister, so what would she be? My grandaunt? My grandaunt knew somebody who worked in a probation hostel for young people. So, young people who were coming out of prison and they were reintegrating back into regular life, but they couldn't go back home to their, situation. So they came to this probation hostel just to see how they got on. And I got a part-time job doing all the shitty hours, that like the really, 24-hour shifts, or the waking night shifts. And that's how I got into youth work. And again, wouldn't change it for the world, because it's led me to here. That path I wouldn't be here without the path that I've traveled. Olive, now that you can hear us, hopefully, like for you, was it a very straightforward path, or were you encouraged to get a good, steady job straight away?
First, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm in a microphone nightmare here. So I went all through school with really poor literacy, and I got to doing my A-levels, and I was really good at maths. So I did maths A-levels. I managed to fail my physics A-level, and I was really lucky that they took me on to university. And if you believe it, the professor who engaged me in university said he'd looked at the results from my school and decided I'd done quite well, so that was fine. And so I went to university and did took a maths degree, which I wasn't, I mean, it was like you haven't got a lot of choice, you know, your literacy is really awful. And so I went and did a maths degree, completed that. And by sheer fluke, well, as you, perhaps it isn't fluke, but after my first year, when I wasn't doing very well with a physics minor, they said, we're starting up a department which is called automatic control. And would you like to take that as a secondary subject rather than physics? Because you clearly don't know enough physics. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. And that turned out to be computing in the really early days. And it set me up for getting a job as a software engineer, just like that. And my mother was filling up the car with petrol one day in a garage opposite GEC in Bournemouth. And she was talking to me while she was filling the car, and she said, they're quite a good company to work for. And during the milk round, I applied to GEC and I ended up with a job in that building. And I loved it because it was completely different to what I thought. We did applications for the early days of applications for computing. So, for example, I was doing medical automation, which is where you have your blood taken out of your veins when you're going on a blood test, and it goes to the hospital to be analysed. And we automated path labs. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was an area I'd never been in before. Nobody really knew what they were doing with automating path labs. And it was absolutely fascinating. And that's how I got into computing.
That's absolutely brilliant. And Tana, I want to come back to you for a second. Like, so, you know, life happened for you, and it changed the path that you were on. But it sounds to me like, even from the last couple of conversations that we've had, that you did try and keep that creative side of you going, even as being a young mom and in your work as well. Like, was that really important to you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think I still read to my children, just keeping that creative outlets in anything that I could do. And I think it definitely rippled down to my children. You know, I put them in local theater. I took them to the library. I mean, my son, he's in theater. My son does YouTube. My daughter, she's in theater. I mean, I still do now hair and makeup on the weekends with her in shorts and photography. So I still do those creative outlets because it is very important. And I'm going to keep creating content because it is something inherent, that I love. So regardless of how, and I think just artistically, in any artist, whether how successful you are, you're just creating content and getting it out there. Whether you're selling anything and people are buying it, or however it speaks to somebody. I mean, it might speak to somebody. You're just getting that out there, and as an artist, not academic.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. It's not about the success or failure in inverted commas, hitting loads of follows or views or anything like that. It's very much around the process, and I think that's one of the key elements that I hope that people will take away from today, especially if there's young people listening, or older people who are going to encourage their younger people to listen, is that we don't have to measure the success or failure of a process that we've gone through on the outcome. Now, that's all fine and well. Like, we still need to pay the bills,
Yeah.
and that's really important. And as Caitlin has, so well put in the chat on YouTube, is that, like, she does her day-to-day job that pays the bills, and then she has her activities outside at the weekend that fuel that creativity inside her. So she's getting that balance, and it's really, really important. And I sometimes work with young people and they will say, like, I, I don't like, I like things, but I don't love anything. And there's this perception now that you have to love what you do as a job. But I look at you, Tana, and so for those of you who don't know, Tana looks after pretty much all the social media for FPK University, excuse me. And I had to do it for a little bit, and I was so happy when Tana was able to take back over the reins, and the difference in the level and the quality and the creativity within the post for FPK University has just kind of gone through the roof. And I look at what you're posting. So those of you who aren't maybe following FPK University, go and follow. You'll see Tana's work. Like the content you're coming up with is just not content necessarily I'd have thought of pulling up at all, and yet it just seems to flow for you. And like, I remember chatting to Olive probably a couple of weeks ago about a post, or maybe we were back and forth on messaging, and we're going, that was such a brilliant post. And like, it's just so great to see you been able to take what was traditionally a creative way of being in terms of the art and stuff like that, and you've kind of morphed into this social media guru now in terms of the content that you're creating. Like,
Fun
do you
is
find
that.
that easy? Do you find it easy to come up with the ideas, or do you find it challenging? Or talk to us about that, because a lot of young people listening might be going, yeah, but like, I can't do it, and like, Tana's got all this experience and that's why. But talk to us about your process producing content now for something, because it's not something necessarily that you've been doing forever.
No, I did take a course just to kind of see what I was doing because I was going in blindly. Um, and that was more the technical. But I did watch, and I mean, we talked about it before, all of us, when we would all get together. And y'all remember I was like watching loads and loads of content and like, I'm over. And y'all were like, it's okay. So I was just going on boards and just literally watching what else people were doing. And then, of course, because, I am a mother, so I was just and researching. You just have to do it. Um, and it's just a process of doing it. So it's a little bit of both. There's obviously a technicality to it, but then, there's the kind that you're just born with where you just, that golden ratio that you just kind of know how things go together. And then there's the technical where you have to learn it, which is me going and how I took that extra class to like, okay, well, I need to know the bits of how to put it together. So, and like you said, how you, just because it's not 100% at first, if you're passionate about anything, things will align. Just because it's not 100% at first. If you're passionate, a hobby can become something eventually.
Yeah.
So,
And it doesn't need to be a multi-million pound or multi-million dollar or multi-million euro venture. It might
no,
just give you a few extra quid at the weekend, which could be
exactly.
fine.
And also too, happiness and your mental health and everything eventually will outweigh your pocket. I mean, I'm look, we all know we're not making, loads and loads of money, but I'm happy at the end of the day that I'm not having to be dictated by a boss, an overleering boss, and or whatever. I'm just doing what I'm doing, and I'm loving it. So you have to balance out your career of what you're willing to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, like you have CEOs that are, um, you know, at the end of the day, are they really happy with what they're having to produce and what they're having to go through? Or somebody that's, hey, I do a painting and whether somebody buys it or not, but you know what, I'm producing content and somebody gets something out of it and they pay me a couple of $100 and I love it.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes those projects, those things become like they grow into something so much bigger, um, because your heart's in it, right? It's a passion or it's something you're interested in. I have a good friend who was a psychologist for years, and she had babies, and took a break from work, and I don't know, her kids were toddlers, and she's like, I need something to do. I don't want to go back to work. I've got to come up with something to do. And so she started making these button art pictures. Like, she would just sketch a picture and glue different buttons onto it, different colors. And she started with what she had at home, and she just made them for fun, and she'd give them away. And then people got interested, and they're like, hey, would you make one for my kitchen? Would you make one for this? And she now has a business based off of art built with buttons. And she's figured out where to buy the buttons. She still does it in her basement. Her kids are in high school now. And that is what she does. And she's so happy. And she's like, I paid to remodel my house with this work. Like,
No
I have my
way.
own boss. It started out as a little fun thing for me to do, killing time while my kids were young. And it's become a wonderful job for her that she loves. And so you never know where these things are going to take you.
I love that story. And Jason, so I want you to talk a bit about, or a bit to those people who maybe they, especially young people, or maybe not so young people, who don't know what they're passionate about, or who, like I said, like things, but they're not going, I really want to do this. This is what really fills my heart. Like for you, like it seems, and the conversations we've had, even the conversation we had before we even kicked off, you didn't just go in a linear fashion, straight line. It's been lots of different things. And I think you said to me yesterday, the day before, that, I'd start something, I get hyper focused on something, and then I get bored of it, and I move on to the next thing. And then I'd get really hyper focused on that, and then I'd drop it and go on to the next thing. What advice would you give to anybody listening who might be struggling with, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I don't even know where to start.
Oh, that's easy. So um, I came to this realization probably 20 years ago. And I even tried to write a book about it that I never finished and never completed that I should. But the premise of it is, um, the number one thing that will hold anybody back is being comfortable. When we're comfortable, we have no reason to, or no urge, or no um, thrive anymore to go beyond that comfort because we're comfort. And I try to compare it to a bodybuilder. So if a bodybuilder is lifting weights and they only lift weights to the point that they feel comfortable, never beyond that to where they actually feel the pain and the hurt, they're never going to get stronger and they're never going to get bigger. It's breaching that level of comfort that really makes the difference. Now, what that means in the context of what we're speaking of here. So, as a young man, my mom wanted me to get a job or have a focus on what I wanted to do for a career, get that job and work through it. What I tell people these days from my experiences is just get a job that you think you want, because I guarantee you it's not going to be the job you really want. I found myself working in telephone sales, working in fast food, working in the trades. And like our conversation we were having, when I get into something, I get very hyper focused and I give it my all, and it's my world, and I get really in tune to it until I believe I'm an expert at it. But at any time, I can lose interest because my mind wanders so much, and I can move on to the next interest that um, that pops up. So when I'm talking to younger people these days, or even people my age, I tell them, it's not like it was when our parents were kids, where um, people got married at young ages. They had a career. It was about starting a family. The husband had to go away to work. Mom had to stay home and take care of the house. That era changed, and the era we're in now, I, I'm kind of jealous. Kids already know that they can get a job and make money doing what they like to do. We were never told. I was never told that as a kid, that you can get a job doing what you like to do. So I experimented with lots of different jobs. And when I hear people that have been in jobs, they went to school, they got a degree, and they got into a particular job, and they stayed in that job, I often will ask them, I say, well, what is it you like to do? And 90% of the time, what their interests are has nothing to do with what their work is. And then I wonder, well, are you staying in this career because it's comfortable? Because you have a steady paycheck, you don't have to learn anything new to go learn a new job. So it's just comfort. So you stay in this career and you just stick to it because you got a family and all this throughout your life until you retire. That works for some people, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. Um, you can very easily, especially when you're coming out of high school and maybe through your college years, if that's the route you choose to go to, it's okay to have multiple jobs. Eventually, you're going to find that job that is in line with your likes as well, and you'll find yourself in that position if you keep the doors open. But the only way to do that is to recognize within yourself, am I am I comfortable? And if I'm comfortable, what do I need to do to get out of this state of being comfortable? It doesn't mean that it's not okay to be comfortable, but while you have that comfort, start exploring different avenues of your likes and see how those likes might transition into income, that can support yourself and support your family. So it always, for me, comes back to comfort. What's your level of comfort? And how can you get out of that level of comfort? Because without getting out of your comfort level, you never get to the next phase. You never get to the next step in life. So my day in and day out goal is always to be uncomfortable. I don't, if I have a comfortable day, I have a wasted day. And it's not that I hear oftentimes people say, hey, have a good day. Well, you can't just have a good day. Nothing just happens on its own. You want to have a good day, you make a great day. So when I address people, I tell them, hey, go make a great day. Because that means there's action behind it. And with action comes discomfort. And with discomfort comes progression.
Absolutely. And Olive, I want to bring you in because talk to me about discomfort and the importance of experiencing discomfort and knowing that it's okay. Because a lot of the young people we work with are experiencing discomfort every single day because they are going into maybe a school or a classroom where they really struggle.
Yeah, and they are, because they are a different generation to when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you more or less did what your parents pushed you into doing, and it slowly changed over time to being almost the other extreme now, which is great because people are actually doing what they want to do. But I remember when my kids were, well, they're still going through this. My kids are in their mid-30s, 40s, and you just go, a job isn't for life anymore. And I've been saying that for years now, but they were, 40 years ago when they were born, that's what the general feeling was. And so they'll have picked up that from school and all sorts of the other places. And the fact that school, puts you through a rigorous curriculum, which you are all expected to follow roughly at the same time, which is complete nonsense now for our children. And so we have kids who are rebelling against that, and there's actually nothing wrong with them. It's just that they want a more flexible way of going through their life, and they want to be able to choose what to do. I always remember when one of my kids was in doing her A-levels, she was asked to do general studies, GCSE, because it was a good idea. And I went, she was doing art A-levels, so it was taking quite a lot of time. And I went, what's the value of this, that you're doing this general studies GCSE? She said, absolutely none, because do you know what? They teach us something in the lessons, and then the exam is on something completely different. So I said, why don't you just stop going? And she looked at me in absolute horror, and I went, it's not going to do you any good, just stop going. And so she stopped going. But that was, 20 years ago. That was probably the first time a parent in that class had said, this is a complete waste of time. And so, but I see so many children now who have moved to the other extreme of doing what they're interested in doing or fighting the system, which is the fighting the system is where I don't like it because they are not getting the opportunities to do what they really want to do. But of course, when you're 16 or 18, you probably don't know what you want to do. But one of the things I brought my kids up with and saying is, you're not going to have a job for life, mate. You're gonna chop and change, and that's all right. I chopped and changed. I mean, I ended up in the world of learning differences, and I started off as a software engineer. You can't get much different than that. But it's what I love doing, and people say to me, "When am I going to retire?" And I go, "Well, there's still work to be done, so not at the moment."
You're not allowed to retire. Lisa, what's your take on that?
So, as Olive was talking, I was just thinking about how much the younger generations, the youngest generations that are now starting to, enter the workforce, settle into the workforce, have really like torn down some of these ideals that we have put in place in terms of like even how they look at what they do, where they work, what the context of a workday looks like. I think with technology, we now have so many more opportunities to redefine. And those younger generations are starting to do that, and that they're like, I don't have to go to an office. I can work from home, or I can work here. I don't have to sit down Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and work on a specific thing. I'm going to go do this here and do this here. Or, they're starting to tear down some of these boundaries that we've put up in terms of this is how you work. This is what you do when you enter the workforce. And I also am very envious of that generation, because I think like I kind of rode that bubble of when I entered the workforce, it was very formal. It was, you put your dressy outfit on and you go sit in an office, and you do your work and you get your hours in and you push and you give up an element of your freedom, of your life. And now that new generation is looking at it completely different. I can, sorry, I'll let you go.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you. And I think what that is actually doing is causing them friction.
Yeah.
Because they're going against a system that's well established. And by going against it, there isn't an automatic place for them to go to. So that is having to be created, which is causing a lot of friction. And what I'm finding with, say, a lot of the young people that I work with, is that sometimes there is so many options available. There are so many choices that they actually get so overwhelmed that they don't even start to become unable to actually step forward and go, well, I'm going to try this and have that be okay. And I'll see a lot of parents kind of go, look, parents have become a lot more in tune with their children and a lot more accepting that, okay, maybe school, university, job for life is not what my child is, just not my child's path. And they've got on board with that, which is great. But what I find is, and it's interesting in the conversations, and they're coming from a good heart. That's what I will say first and foremost. What I can see is, or what I do see is parents will talk to their 16, 17, 18-year-old who's kind of going, I think I kind of want to do a trade, or I don't know if I want to go work in an office. And what the parents will say was, yeah, but like a trade is hard. And 30 years of being a roofer, like that is like, yeah, you'll earn money, but like that's going to break your body. And they could be right. There's a good chance it probably will like do serious damage to their body, but they might be really happy for those 30 years doing a job that they enjoy. And I think that's where we need to kind of take that step back and allow our children to play around with things, because at 16, they might just look at their friends, or they might look at what's the easiest job for me to do. Well, a roofer looks pretty easy to me, for those who are okay with heights. That looks like an easy enough job. Or a builder looks easy enough, and it's a lot less technical and a lot easier for me to go than have to go that university route. And they'll go and they'll do it, and then the parents will be unsure about them going and doing it, and then the kids will go and do it and find they don't like it, And then we get the, well, if you hadn't listened to me when I told you, you wouldn't end up here. And now look at, what are you going to do now? What's going to happen now? Here you are. And look, you're still living in my house and you're 20. Like, I expected you gone 2 years ago and you're still hanging around like a bad smell. And I'm still doing your washing and I'm still doing your cooking and I'm still doing the cleaning. And you're just sitting on your arse playing your PlayStation or playing your Xbox. What are you going to do now? And then the kids, because they're not kids anymore, they're grown adults, are going, don't you speak to me like that. You're just trying to deal, you're trying to put me down. You're trying to keep me down. And there's massive friction. And then I get these parents and young people who are adults coming in to sit on this sofa going, we are killing each other. You need to sort this out. But Tana, I want to come to you. Sometimes I get on a bit of a rant there, but talk to me. Yeah, so that's why I'm coming to you. You're the voice of reason here right now. But I even lost my train of thought there. Yes, so for those kids, or I call them kids, they're not, they're young adults. For those young adults maybe who are kind of going, look, what advice would you give me? Because like I do like playing my console and I do like hanging out with my friends. I don't really like, having to do a 40-hour week. I'd love to do maybe a 20-hour week, but I don't want my parents telling me what to do, but I do want to live in their house and I do want to eat their food and I do want mom to keep doing the washing and, cleaning my dirty underpants, right? So what advice would you give to those young people who are just unsure and they want to change, but they don't have to change too much?
Oh, geez.
You're getting all the easy questions, Tana.
I know. No, I'm living with that with my son right now, as you know. Um, they still need a plan. They still have to have a plan. Um, you have work, school, because you can't, as you know, you can't just lollygag around. You have to have something in motion. You have to have some sort of goal, because time does catch up eventually. You have to have, something in motion, because things do start to pass or whatever. We always told our children they could stay with us as long as they want, as long as you're going to school, you're working. You have to have a passion of something. You can't just stay here and stew, and you have to be doing something. And the youngest one, he's lingering, but our daughter, she lingered. She lingered till she was 24, until she eventually left. They were all in school, they were all working, but um, but it's tough. Things are a lot higher. It's not like back in the old days when you could pay for college and in a summer school, or you could work for a summer and then pay for college the next whole semester. It's just not. A lot of the older generation is always like, oh, these young kids, they're so full. It's just like it's just not. Economically, it is not the same. We constantly crunch the numbers for our children, and it is so hard. And I understand why. Even my son and daughter, my son, he has his own business and he does so well, and they still live together, and they do well, but they just are barely making things well where they can go out and live a little. And that's just barely making
Yeah.
it meet. And, even my son, that is a college graduate, and there's 3 college graduates that live in Dallas, and they're barely making it. And these are college graduates. And like we said, these are people that they say, oh, go to school, get a degree, live, if you do that, then you can have a better life. And they all did. And the 2 college graduates that are living with him, it took them a year to find, a job. And then they're all living together in this house that are barely getting by. And that's the process my son is, you know.
And I think that's the difficulty for a lot of young people now. And I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head. The older generations will say they're so lazy they don't want to do it. But like for most of us growing up, we could leave home at 18, 19, get a part-time job, get somewhere to live and to be able to afford to live. Now we wouldn't have lots, but we could afford to pay our rent and our bills and put food on the table. Whereas it's totally different now for that younger age group. And like I think you did also hit another nail on the head when you mentioned purpose. And for me, I'll always talk about purpose. We all have to have a purpose. We have to have a reason to get us up out of the bed in the morning to go and do something. And that might not necessarily be a job, a paying job, but even setting ourselves a goal of, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to apply for 4 jobs, I'm going to post on LinkedIn and try and reach out to different people to try and get some sort of even a part-time job. Like that's so important. We have to feel like we are contributing in some way. And for a lot of the young people I would work with, their mental health is slipping because they don't have that sense of purpose, which then feeds directly into their sense of their self-worth and their self-belief. And Jay-Sean, I know for us, like we are older, and I can't wait for us to get some younger people on to this podcast to get some of their perspective. So it is easier for us to kind of go, follow your heart and, play around with things and try different things. And you might try 50 different jobs and you might not find the one you love. But at that age, it's a very, very difficult thing to do when you don't have the level of experience that we have. And I don't mean actually even just work experience, but life experience where you can do 50 jobs and be okay at that stage because everything that they've grown up with has told them you need to have a career path, that you need to have a job, and then you can start to be happy. But happiness is not a destination, it's a flow state. So what's your take on, oh, no, I'll ask you the same question I asked Tana. What advice would you give to an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's starting out, who's unsure of where to go and is unsure of themselves?
I don't think I'd start with giving advice to the 18-year-old. I'd give advice to the 18-year-old's parents.
Okay.
Um, Most of these things we're talking about comes down to parent observation. We're the ones who see our kids from early stage up until they're getting ready to hit the workforce. Certain things we notice about our children throughout the day, their likes, what they're interested in, what they're good at. Even I'm sure Lisa can account for this. She knows things that her daughters are good at that they don't even realize they're good at. And when you're like, oh, you're really good at that, they're like, really? I was just doing it. Yeah, but you're really good at it. So kids don't often know what they're good at. Even young adults. And I deal with this at one of my jobs where I work with some other people. I work with a couple young guys, and I've watched them now for the past year, and I know what they're good at, and it's not what they're doing for their career right now. So, as adults, as parents, we need to share our observations with the younger people or with the people we're trying to guide. As parents, I'll speak from a parent point of view. If I see my child is a video gamer and he's really into gaming, um, I'm not going to push them to say, hey, you need to go to college and do this and that, because what's going to happen? They're going to go study something for 4 to 6 years, get a degree in something they've never actually done. Now they do the job, they don't like the job, and you've wasted all that money on college, and they're picking a new career, which is a vicious cycle that I know so many people who have gone through. So I'm going to say, if video gaming is what you like, what is it you like about it? Why don't you start trying to build video games and you start giving them the tools, the technology that we all have these days? It's much easier. Start giving them the tools to understand more about what their interests are, so they can, it's something they do, and that's something that they can transition into a career possibly. Because whenever you're doing something that's a career based off from what you love to do, then as we all know, it's no longer a job, it's just labor of love. So I wouldn't really, so this is more for parents and older people that are trying to guide the younger adults and youth. Identify their strengths, tell them what they're good at, help them to decipher what aspects tie into what they're good at. If they're like to doodle and draw art all the time, start studying art. Who are your favorite artists? You can get a job at a art gallery, experience that. Um, Anytime, going back to directly to a kid, anytime a young person tells me this is what I want to do when I grow up, I ask them, have you ever done anything like that? They say, I want to be a police officer. Have you ever done a ride along? No. Well, then how do you know you want to be a police officer? So it's not just telling them what they need to do or what they need to study. It's showing them the different aspects of what they're interested in that can be made into a business, that can be interesting for education. So they say, okay, yeah, I do like to draw, but I've been I want to go to school for to be a doctor. Well, go walk around the hospital with a couple doctors or find somebody and see how that is. And you might not like it. So you should, if you really like art, go to school for art and lean all the way into it. So I guess in my ramblings, I'm not so critical on anyone picking any specific education route or profession route. Um, I'm more interested in individuals finding out who they are, what they enjoy, and how they can make that into something that they can carry on for the rest of their lives. Because there's really nothing that anyone does that can't be turned into a business. Just talking.
Yeah.
How many coaches do we have out there that just talk to people, counselors? They're just good listeners. So there's a job for everybody that supports everyone's strength. It's just finding those strengths and identifying them.
Yeah, and it's okay to change your mind, because the other thing, like the things we love changes. So there's things I loved at 16, 18, 28 that I don't love as much now, and that's okay. Olive, I want to come to you. So the same question to you. What advice would you give to those younger people who are unsure of the direction that they might go in?
I'm going to vote with Jason because
You can't steal his idea.
no, but when I first started working with dyslexic kids, the very first thing I said to them was, "What do you enjoy doing?" And that always confused parents because that wasn't why they brought their kids to see me, because it was what they were doing that they didn't like. And I was continuously interested in what they were doing well and doing exactly what Jason said. How do they do what they do? And what is it that they're really interested in? What is it that really switches them on? Once you've found that, and you've also praised them in a very descriptive way, you don't say your kid's brilliant, you say that particular thing you did is really, I really like. So they can't get out of it. They can't go, it's rubbish. You go, well, I really liked it. I'm sorry, and then you go, and how do you do that? How did your mind come up with that idea? And then how can you use that for something else? That's exactly the key. I started on 25 years ago, and I've carried on with it ever since.
It hasn't
In
changed.
different ways.
Yeah. And Lisa, we'll give you the opportunity to answer that question too. So what would you say to those younger people? And you can't jump on the same bandwagon.
But Jason was so good. He was so spot on with that.
Don't
Now,
talk him up. He thinks he's great anyway. He doesn't need any more talking up.
no more positivity for Jason. No, but I do agree with the idea of, I think sometimes I see this with my daughters, like some of the things when I look at them and I see as just tremendous strengths, they don't see it all, or they see as a weakness. So like reframing that and like reminding them of that is such a powerful thing. I also am a huge advocate for, as you start to dive into what are you interested in, especially when you're young and you're like, you don't have the experience, or you're our age and you want to try something completely different and you don't have any background in that. I had an employee years ago. She was our receptionist, and she was not doing a great job. She was about to get fired. and her boss hated her. And I was I was having coffee with her, just standing at the front desk talking to her, and she said, "Well, my husband's a project manager, and he's been talking to me about software testing." And at the time, I worked in software development, and I ran a software testing department. And started asking some of those same questions, like, "What is it that is interesting about it to you?" And she says, "Well, I really like taking things apart and blah blah blah." And she's like, "I picked up this book," and suddenly we get into this whole conversation about, she's like, "Well, I studied accounting, and I'm very into detail." And like, in my head, even if she wasn't necessarily asking for a job in software testing, I was like, she would be a really good fit. Like, all right. So tell you what, I said, when you find you have nothing to do, you have extra time, come on over and I'll show you how to do some things. And so it started as kind of an apprenticeship. And she ended up not only working for me, but she ended up running the department for me years later. Her
Wow.
career path at that point had been Starbucks and an administrative assistant. And at that time, when we first started talking, she felt so poorly about herself. She's like, "I don't fit in the corporate world. I don't know what to do. I thought maybe I could try this, but I don't have any skills that make me good at it." And when you sit down and you break it down and you look at, well, you do this for accounting and you do that really well, and that translates well over here. And they start to see those parallels and they build up that confidence in themselves. And they do the work on their own to grow, to better understand the role. They put the effort in. The boundaries are endless. So she works for somebody else now. She does something like, you know totally different, adjacent, but fabulous career. But she was by far like best employee I've ever had.
I absolutely love that. And so I'm going to twist what I've asked you folks slightly differently from myself. The joys of being the host in the hot seat. I'm going to say, I'm going to give that, to follow on from what you just said, Lisa, a bit of advice to the adults in the rooms. So you don't necessarily have to have your own children, but you're going to be coming across young people, be that nieces, nephews, young employees working in the same place, or you might be coaching certain sports or activities, whatever. And a lot of us don't realize the power we have and the influence we can have on, one, how someone feels about themselves, but two, seeing the things that they don't see for themselves and offering them an opportunity to try and allowing them to fail and for that to be okay. So if you are somebody who's out there in a position like Lisa was, and you see somebody who might be struggling, a lot of the times what we might go to is just that they're just not that good at that job, or they're just in the wrong line of work, or they're just, and we make assumptions about them being good or not good, when in actual fact, I think for any of us, and this goes for me as much as anybody, if there's something not working out for somebody who's working for you, you got to look at yourself and go, well, what is it? What are we not doing to help them try and improve their situation within this organization? And if you can ask yourself that and then get to a point where you're like, well, honestly, I can't think of anything else. We've tried A, B, C, D right through to Z, then it might just be the wrong fit. But by giving people that opportunity, we never know where they might grow. We never know what might come out of that. And while we might never even hear that we had a positive influence, that's not what it's about. It's not about us getting the praise. It's about their lives just being better. And that's what I think. So I'm not a religious person, but I believe in our spirit. And I believe our spirit is the thing, it's the impact we have on the world around us while we're on this planet. So when I leave this earth, hopefully in a long, long time, what I hope people will take is that, knowing Alan, being around Alan, he had a positive impact on my life. And he had a positive influence on some of the choices I made. That's for me, somebody's spirit living on. That's what we leave this world. That's what's important to me. Now, it could be something totally different for other people. But for any of us, right, if you're a young person, an older person, someone in the middle, and you're unsure of yourself, every single one of us has worth and value, as much worth and value as anyone else walking the planet. And if we can start to tell ourselves, do you know what? It's okay for me to try and it's okay for me to fail. It's amazing how more often than not, things actually work out relatively okay. Doesn't mean life is good all the time, but for the most part, things work out okay. And for any of us, if life is okay, that's been pretty good. Right. And cue me digging my own grave, climbing into it, and putting over the thing like the cartoons used to do. Ladies and gentlemen, have we any final thoughts for the listeners this week? You can jump in and give any final thoughts.
None.
None. That's okay, Tammy.
I want to say one thing, that it's important that when we're around those that need to be mentored, or our kids that are looking for that we're trying to get on the right path, or just those people we're around that we're talking about, we need to express these things to, especially as parents when we come home from work. I think the most important thing, I had some friends that lived in these type of households where parents come home from work and first thing, work was this, and I'm so everything about work is a complaint. Well, that's not showing your child or the young person that you're encouraging that work is a fun place to be. So we need to check ourselves when we come through the door and make sure we highlight the positive things of our day. And it's okay to say, oh, yeah, I had a great day. This was that. I did have a couple challenging moments, and sharing that information will reinstill that work is okay. Work can be fun. Work can be exciting. It's not something that you'll be coming home like me, griping and groaning and moaning every day. So we have to express a positive outlook on the things we want our children or younger people that we're mentoring around us to see. We can't muddy the water with negativity.
We can't muddy the water in negativity. Olive, have you anything you want to finish off on?
I just put be flexible in the chat. I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
Is just look at possibilities. This is parents, teachers, employers, and students.
Love that. Lisa, any final thoughts?
No, I love what everybody's saying. Be flexible, just be open. I think so much is changing, evolving right now. There's so much evolving, and having an open mind, and especially I think as a parent or as a mentor, even having an open mind to the way that our kids are going to be approaching the world, doing things, is going to be completely different than the way that we did, and that's okay. And to not come back if they go out and they try something and they fail, say, well, if you'd just done it my way, if you'd just gone off and gone to college for 4 years, you would have been okay. They're still going to be okay. They'll find their way.
They will find their way. And that is where we will wrap episode number 3 of the Future Proof Knowledge podcast. We will be back next Tuesday at the exact same time. Check out our socials. We are lashing out the content left, right, and center. Please give us a subscribe. Please give us a rating. A 5 would be good. 1, maybe don't rate. It's okay. But give us a 5 and share it with your friends. It all helps build this podcast to be even better. We've got some great guests coming up, and we'll see you next week. Look after yourselves.